A hot mic moment has caused embarrassment for Joe Biden. At a media conference, the president was asked about the record inflation that's gripping the US, with the journalists getting an insult in reply.
That's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid son of a...
Now, Biden did later on apologise, saying it was nothing personal. Meanwhile, an increasing number of Americans think that the current administration is mishandling the economy. And yet the president blames only supply chain disruptions, saying things are looking rosy for the US economy.
We're experiencing the strongest economic recovery in the world. Even after accounting for inflation, our economy is bigger and our families have more money in their pockets than they did before the pandemic. But that's not our view. Our experts believe, and the data shows, that most of the price increases we've seen were expected and are expected to be temporary.
The United States is currently grappling with soaring consumer prices as inflation jumps at its fastest pace in nearly 40 years. Experts cite the pandemic as well as Federal Reserve hesitancy to raise interest rates. High inflation particularly has been hitting ordinary American households, with basic goods such as food, gas and clothes getting more and more expensive. Right, I speak now to Spike Cohen, who is the 2020 vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party. Welcome, Spike. Biden was caught on that hot mic there saying inflation was a good asset. Now, I immediately interpreted that as sarcasm, but yes, not everybody might have taken it that way. That's the danger when you say something like that. It can be interpreted several ways. How did you interpret it? And has he left himself open to a lot of criticism with it?
Well, I think he's left himself open to more criticism about being a hypocrite, about, how he talked during the campaign and over the last year about how he was going to be more respectful with reporters, and then he acts this way. But no, I think it was clearly sarcasm. Joe Biden knows that inflation is terrible for not just the economy, but also for his administration and any political capital that he may have had. I think, frankly, what we saw was frustration over the fact that his policies have helped lead to this inflation that we're seeing, this record inflation, frustration over his rhetoric about shutting down the virus, meeting up with the reality of the fact that the virus isn't getting shut down, frustration over the fact that now he seems to be flirting with a direct conflict with Russia, fresh off the heels of losing a 20-year battle to the Taliban. And frankly, I also think frustration about his cognitive decline that we're watching happen in front of us. So I think that frustration has led to him acting this way. And frankly, I think we're going to see more of it.
Now, it's hard to believe that we're in a scenario like this, where you're listening to Joe Biden speak, and it is very reminiscent of something you might have expected from Donald Trump. When you hear the President Biden calling somebody an SOB, under no pressure at the time, really, is that going to be of concern even to his supporters that he's behaving like that?
I think so. I mean, certainly his most blind partisans will be every bit as supportive of his as, Trump's most blind partisans were of him. Frankly, I mean, Neil, Joe Biden has been known as a gaffe machine since I was a child, even before I was involved in politics. He has been known as the guy that says goofy stuff. And over the years, as he has gotten older and as, frankly, we've watched the cognitive decline, he says even more goofy stuff. So I was always amused by the people during the campaign who would say, well, we need to get Trump out so we can have someone in who's going to, talk with less nonsense and speak to us more frankly. And I thought, Joe Biden is who you expect to do this? So, I mean, frankly, this was baked into the cake as soon as he got elected.
Is hindsight going to make Americans start looking at things differently? Because under Trump, the economy was going pretty well until the pandemic came along. But it was like on the flip side, well, you had his erratic kind of behaviour and his outbursts. But now what they've got is a really struggling economy, and they're still getting these bizarre outbursts. Are they going to look at the Trump presidency in a different way now?
So this is an interesting thing, right? I believe that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to say, hey, during Trump, things seemed to be going well before the pandemic, and now things are doing terribly under Joe Biden. It actually goes deeper than that. A lot of the inflation we're seeing now is as a result of the inflationary stimulus spending that happened under Trump. But Joe Biden and Democrats were supporting that every bit as much as Donald Trump and the Republicans. So there's really no one in D.C. who doesn't own the inflation that's happening right now, save a handful of deficit hawks who were speaking out against this from the beginning, both Republican and Democrat. But the reality is, the average voter has very short-term memory and maybe doesn't understand the complexities of the economy, especially when it comes to something like inflation. And yeah, they're going to blame it squarely on Biden. And frankly, he's been the architect of bad policy in Washington, D.C. for the last 40 years. So if there's anyone to blame for what's happening right now, why not Joe Biden?
Let's spare a thought for the average American. We know that voters vote with their pockets. They think about their finances first and foremost. And at the moment, they haven't really got much in terms of finance, and prices are rocketing through this record level of inflation. And what they see from the leader of their country is a man who seems to be rattled when asked about it. Is that just going to fuel their frustration?
I would imagine so. Not only is he acting rattled, he's cherry-picking data and trying to whitewash what's happening. He's telling Americans not to believe their lying eyes and their lying pocketbooks and checkbooks, telling them that they have less and less ability to be able to pay for the cost of living and are relying more and more on subsidies and help from others just to be able to get by in life. To sit there and tell an American public who is increasingly having a difficult time being able to afford gas and groceries, and I'm not talking about the poor, I'm talking about the middle class being unable to afford the basic cost of living, and telling them, oh no, my experts are telling me everything is fine. They know he's lying. They know it's not true. And I think the midterms are going to be brutal for him, frankly. If there isn't a major political change between now and then, and if he thinks that starting a hot war with a nuclear power is going to be that change that he needs, I think that's going to blow up in his face entirely. And I hope, frankly, he doesn't lead us into something that blows up in all of our faces.
Spike, good to talk to you. Appreciate your time. My guest, Spike Cohen, 2020 vice presidential candidate for the Libertarian Party.
Thank you, Neil.